Welcome, coaches. How are y'all doing this fine evening? Hey, do you want to talk about the tight 3-4 defense and why it's a pain in the ass and why I am very mad at Coach Manis for bringing this to the masses, because it is, without a doubt, the number one defense I hate going against? Well, then you're in luck, because we are going to be talking about the 3-4 tight defense. Coach, before we get into it, let us know a little bit about your background. And if you call me sir again, I'm going to reach through the phone and plunk you on the nose, man.
I'll try my best. So I actually graduated from the school that I'm at now. I graduated in 2013. Was actually on the very first varsity football team. Was on the very first time we built the field and all that jazz. Graduated in 13. Went and played a little ball at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio, a little D3 ball, and then got out due to some injuries. Dabbled in some arena ball and things like that. Didn't work out. But 2019, I got asked to be on staff again, and that wasn't right away as a defensive coordinator until the season hit, and I kind of took over in the swing of things. Of course, we had COVID and things like that hit, so we didn't have a spring season. Really didn't have an off season or a summer like most people. And then this past year, we got when I took over, the defense was allowing 49 points per game. We got that down to 30, so we were right at 3 points per possession. And then we just played a spring game. On Friday, we only gave up 14, which is actually the lowest points that we've allowed since 2017. So, everything's picking up.
So this is, you said your full first, like, coming in, installing the defense and everything like that. How fast did the players pick it up throughout this spring? Pretty fast. So this is year 2. So when I came in, my head coach pretty much just said, as long as 3-4, I don't really care what it is. We have 2 read-in. We primarily play double fours, Okie front, and then sometimes we slide into an over front. So I was kind of piecing them together. I'm a quarters guy. I played in a 3-stack, so I kind of know the odd world a little bit. But being young, I wanted to run the newest and best system. And what was that in 2019? David Aranda won a national championship running the tight front. So immediately just studying, diving in, it was all about the tight front. They picked it up pretty fast. We used a lot of the same things. So, 2 read is our base, as well as our trips checks. So we run poach and mini, which has 2 read in it. So we didn't have to reteach a bunch of different coverages. They already kind of knew quarters and cover 2. They didn't really have any of the middle field close coverages that we like to use sometimes. But the tight front was completely new to them. They knew how to play over and under a little bit, but not great. But they picked it up really fast. In fact, this past spring, we used the entire fall playbook. I installed everything in like 5 days, and we used everything on Friday. We used every part. We used all 5 fronts and all 5 coverages, and we didn't have many mental mistakes either. So they picked it up fast. I can't wait to get a full off season, unlike last year. And finally kind of re-rep things, hammer down on technique and things like that. So I'm excited, but they've done great. And that's what the team of 20, we had 28 last year. We only had a staff of 4. So we won platoon. So if you're thinking, Tyler has, 40, 50 guys, I don't, just 28. All right. And I want to touch on what you're going to do after you installed it. You have this little break coming up. What are you doing in the fall? I guess it's the summer. Are you installing new things or anything like that? So I want to touch on that. But before we do, hey, coaches, if you have any questions, again, you know the drill. Put it in the comments. Let us know, because we are here for you. Emmanuel, what's going on, man? How are you doing? Coach Will, how are you? Coach Horton from Washington. You got a fan from Washington there, Coach. They come to learn about the 3-4 tight. What makes the 3-4 tight? I know what it is from an offensive perspective, why it's a son of a bitch to go against. Why do you like running the 3-4 tight?
Why? I think, I'll say this over and over again, but there's value in being unique. So, if you look at any kind of clinics, some offensive coordinator is going to be talking about how to attack the tight front. If you go to any kind of defensive clinic, someone's going to be talking about the tight front. So it's very mainstream right now. So a lot of the ways people attack it are also very mainstream. So I love the tight front, obviously, because spread football is huge right now. We had a split back veer team, a flex punt team, and a wing T team, but they all had spread elements in their game. So, the flex punt team actually first play of the game lined up in 10 personnel and ran orbit motions. They still ran the same plays, but they ran out of spread. So all these teams are now turning to the gun
And when you think about spread football, what's the golden thing with spread football and trying to establish run? It's those open B gaps, those B gap bubbles. So any way you can eliminate those, just starting out, you immediately kind of get ahead of the game and forcing an offensive coordinator to either choose to try and run inside zone against tight and try to bash their head against the wall, or get to a different part of their playbook to where they have all this off tackle stuff, but it's not stuff that's their identity. If they're installing it that week, it's probably going to be rough for them. And they probably is their plan B. They're probably not going to run off tackle counter or power and things like that, especially if they're a zone team already.
Okay, so, and you're absolutely right. When you take away that B gap as an offensive perspective, it's like, damn, what am I going to do now? What do you see offenses doing to try to combat the tight front? And what are your adjustments to that? Like, what's your game within the game when offenses are trying to get you out of it?
Yeah. So we see this all the time. It really comes down to an off-tackle gap scheme typically. So that could be buck sweep. That could be outside zone lead. That could be speed options, C-gap power, of course. Counter is a big one. Counter, especially if counter is the biggest thing, especially with Oklahoma running so long, so many different ways, that kind of trickles down to what we see. So we get a ton of GH counter, GT counter, any kind of counter stuff. So anything off tackle, anything where they can down block on a 4-eye and then get +1 post snap. Sometimes that's pre-snap, whether that's 11 or 20 personnel. Anytime you're adding an extra person into the box, they love doing that. Offense coordinators love doing that. But if they're a spread team, they're primarily a 10 personnel team. They may not love doing that, but that's typically how teams attack us. In fact, last year, my very first year, I did a punt scout on a team, and they were 100% midline, inside zone, outside zone team, and I had 5 games of them, and they didn't show a single thing in gap scheme. Well, we get into game time, and it's second quarter, and I can't see anything, but I finally realized, holy crap, they're running buck sweep, second quarter. They didn't, I don't know if they put that in that week or, that was kind of in their back pocket all along. They had just never shown it, but it happens again and again and again. It happened Friday. They were 100% zone team, and what they come out with, they ran quarterback GH counter, and they ran C-gap power out of 11 personnel. So we see it over and over and over again of teams going plus personnel and then running off tackle any kind of way possible. The good thing about that is, you kind of know what their plan B is, so I can immediately go to my plan B, my plan C. So how do I attack their plan B? A lot of that, you can think of it as getting into under post snap. So we teach it originally under pre snap. So we have an under front. We just pull a string. We pull the strong side into a 5. We pull the nose into a strong shade. The weak end into a 3, and we reduce our weak side outside linebacker, our jack, into a 5, and boom, now we're under front. That way we can teach the run fits first, even though necessarily we might be getting into that 100 different ways post snap. So the very first way we do that post snap is Aranda's Theismann. So any kind of quarterback call for Aranda is a creeper. So a 4-man pressure. Theismann's going to be to the tight end. So the strong side end is going to start in the 4-eye. At the snap of the ball, he's going to slant to a 5. The 0 is going to slant kind of to a strong shade. The weak side 4-eye is going to play like a 3-tech, so he's no longer really attack or react attack. He's kind of slanting into that gap, into that B gap, looking for depth. And then you're bringing that. You can either choose to bring the weak side outside linebacker or not, either way. But then also that Mike linebacker is inserting into that B gap. So there's your under front post snap. You got a 5-tech, a shade, and a 3-tech pretty much. But now it's happening post snap. And a lot of guys, they say, well, you can't. The whole entire reason for running a tight front is to create doubles. So, let's not full line move and things like that. I agree with that. You're asking a lot out of your 4-eyes to consistently slant all game into a 5. It's a hard technique for them to get over top. Maybe you have the dudes to do it, maybe you don't. But, as long as you can somehow get someone into that C gap, whether that's pre-snap or post-snap, you need to do that. So we'll start, if we're getting 11 personnel, if we're getting C gap power, and they're running at that tight end over and over and over again, we'll start by putting the 5-tech there pre-snap. So we'll go under front, and we'll just play a normal under front. And then we'll go from that to stemming to it. So we'll start in tight, and then boom, right before the snap of the ball, we'll get into it under front. And then the third level, we'll run Theismann. So then boom, pre-snap, it looks like tight. post snap it looks like under. And we'll do that 100 different ways to try and, combat off tackle.
I like how you call it Theismann. Do you know that if any of your players understand that Joe Theismann was a quarterback way back in the 80s?
No, we don't. Aranda's calls were Joe Namath, Theismann, Kyle Orton.
His age. He's showing his age.
Yeah, there's no way any of my kids know Kyle Orton. So I love Aranda. I love the way he thinks about the game, the way he attacks offenses and things like that. The one thing I do not love about his system is his language system. None of my kids know any of those quarterbacks, So pointing at a ring for Terry Bradshaw, that's not going to work. They don't know Terry Bradshaw is.
You would have to do the bald head or the –
No.
Not even that. No. So, okay. So then that leads me to a question. And coaches, I see y'all. I'll say something to you in a minute, but you're running his system. Now, were you always a big fan of his before he was at LSU, or was it just at LSU where you're like, holy crap, this is amazing. I want to do this?
I knew I'm a Buckeye. So I trained my whole entire family from Columbus. So obviously, playing Big Ten championship games, Wisconsin, I think is like the 1B of the Big Ten. So I see them year after year. And, they don't have these studs. A lot of them are corn-fed, white guys, and they're just balling out of control. They're consistently a top 10 defense. So that kind of planted the seed in my mind. And then when he won that national championship, it showed that his system was flexible enough to, play with the guys he had at Wisconsin and play with the guys he had at LSU. So it showed it was a flexible system. It worked in the Big Ten against plus personnel, 21 personnel, tight end on the field, and then also worked against, at LSU, obviously, where you're seeing more spread stuff, but super athletes all around the field as well. So, no, it wasn't always there, but, as soon as someone said 3-4, that's where my mind went to immediately. And I didn't know of anyone in the area that was running the tight front on our conference schedule. I still don't think anyone runs the tight front.
No one does. Like I said, and when everybody asks me if I was a defense, because I played college ball as a linebacker at a small D2 school. I started off on the defensive side of the ball. Ugh, I'm just kidding. I love defense. And everyone asked me, hey, what would you run if you were a defensive coordinator? I would say the 3-4, tight front, and I would go cover one because I still, for the life of me, you got to walk me through it. I don't understand the math with quarters, how we can get 7 or 9 people in the box like that on top of also playing matchup zone principles in the back. I'm dumb as shit. So I don't understand that. I've tried looking at it. Why do you go quarters instead of cover one? And the reason why is I know from my quarterback's perspective, if they see one high and everybody, even if it isn't man, one high with everybody in their face, they crap the bed. Like they're shook. Mm-hmm. Why do you instead go quarters?
Well, the very first thing is I think if you're a new coach and you're at a new team, you should use what's there so you don't completely crap the bed year one. If you can take things from the previous system and the previous staff, absolutely do that. Just makes things super easy. But then if you're a tight base, you don't have those B-gap bubbles. So now if you get into a light box to where you have to move the mic or the well outside the box, you no longer have to sling the fits. So sling the fits means if the mic was outside the box and you were in the under front, he has to fit into that B-gap still post-snap, even though he's outside the box. That's a really tough task. Well, now with the tight front, if you're a tight base, you just move that end into the B gap, and now he's just responsible for the C gap, or he's a flow player. So, you don't have to do wonky things like sling the fits, or you don't have a safety fit in A or B gap, or things like that if that's your base. So, quarters though plays in the general philosophy of we're going to make you march down the field. So we're going to try to spot the ball around the 20, 25 consistently, and we're going to make you drive the ball consistently. No explosive plays. We only allow 2 explosive plays on Friday, and that's right where we want to be is 2 explosive plays. We think that will hold you right around 14 or less points, and that's typically how it plays out. So if we can play quarters, we never beat, vertically cap everything. The number one passing concept that we saw was 4 verts, whether that was switch verts or choice. It was 4 verts. I think it was 45% of the time when teams are 5-stepping, they were throwing 4 verts. So, which is another reason why we run 2 read is the second one is slant bubble. So you're hammering down on those bubbles, you're taking away the outside and you're taking away deep. If you can throw out breaking routes or 7 cuts or whatever in the hole, good on you if you have a quarterback that can do that. But as long as we make you drive it and we can try to get you to 10 plays, I'm pretty comfortable. If you can do that consistently, we're in for a long night, but, good on you.
All right, so does that play into not so much defense with the quarters, but the lack of imagination in the passing game with offensive coordinators where they're just like, YOLO, I'm going either deep or I'm running a slant?
Absolutely. Yeah. I play, my head coach is an offense coordinator. His son is a quarterback, and he's a stud. He's 6'4", and he's 14. He broke the passing record and everything like that.
Arm.
And, yeah, he's an animal. And he can make incredible 7-cut throws. So, corner routes and, a 10-yard outs and things like that, sail routes. He can make those throws. But how many quarterbacks do we see on the schedule that can make that throw consistently? Not many. And if I can attack the protection using a creeper and try to get at least a little pressure, how many times is he actually going to hit that? Not many. So we don't see a ton of different kind of passing concepts. We throw the ball in the area more than anyone. We throw the ball Friday night. We threw the ball 50 times. That doesn't happen. And that doesn't happen in Southwest Florida. Whether that's the coaching or the quarterbacks, I'm not sure what it is. We have a ton of athletes in the area. We just don't see it. So lack of imagination, maybe. But if I'm a young quarterback, if I'm the offense coordinator, I'm not on the opposite side of the ball. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to 3-step and just kind of let the ball go, let my kids try to make a play on it, or I'm going to throw bubbles and slants and things like that where, either shallow or really deep, but trying to, read the middle of the field, mesh. We don't see a ton of mesh. We saw it like twice last year. We didn't see any Y cross or anything like that. So, yeah, I think that would play into it.
Come on, coaches, get a little bit more creative here. Well, we have some coaches here. Let's Coach Brennan, what's going on, man? Coach Birdwell, Mackie's got a camera upgrade. I have it, so you can see how freaking ugly I am right now. Coach Dukes from Tennessee, what's going on? Coach Brown just got home from practice, ran over here so he could learn from you in the tight front. We got our first question. Does 12 personnel give you any issues in the tight front?
Yeah, so if you look at Aranda's playbook, the very first sheet isn't tight. It's actually under 1, which is immediately where we would go. So we would play under 1 if you're going 12 personnel. And we would play, people call it city, key, combo. It's where, those safeties are looking like too high, but wherever that back's going, one back's dropping out and the other's, in the hole, whatever way you want to play it. But yeah, tight front, it's not great, which is not great in the 12 personnel, but you need to have answers for everything, which is why we don't just run one front. We play over, we play under, we play tight, we play okie, we do all of that. We don't move maybe as much as other teams post-snap necessarily, because that's a lot of teaching on top of also playing all those fronts. But yeah, absolutely 12 personnel. Just with us, I'm in a small school, so we play 2-way ball. So how many offenses have 2 legitimate tight ends? Not many. And if they do, one's probably never going out for a pass, or they're both wide receivers and they can't block really well, one or the other. So yeah, you do have to get into different parts of your playbook, but we still kind of have an answer for that and playing in the under front.
All right, this is me being, again, a dumbass. Why did defensive coordinators worry so much about the pass? But at least from my point of view, there's not that many passing teams. Like, to me, it would be the reverse. I want to worry about the run, and then if they beat me with the pass, hats off. But it seems like it's always the reverse. Like, they start from the back end and then work forward. Why is that?
Well, the back dictates the front. So, if you're playing tight, you're probably going to play too high. If you're in an under and over front, you're probably going to close the middle of the field and play cover 1 or cover 3. And then you're going to get into, the run fits change. As soon as you go from too high, where you're playing solo spacing would be 6 or 7 man box, 6 or 7 man spacing, to where now your inside linebackers are playing stack and track, where they're stacking over blocks, and they're not running through gaps anymore. They're stacking over blocks, and they're waiting to fit off the ball. Whereas now, when you get into under over, you reduce the middle of the field, so now you have a post safety, and you have one of your safeties is down in the box now. Now you're in 8-man spacing, 8-man box. Now you have those traditional run-throughs where you're pretty much playing a 4-4 or a 4-3, to where you have a lever still and a lever player, and now you're getting all those run-throughs, which is another reason why we like having answers, because, how many offensive coordinators think the defensive coordinator that I'm playing this week is fitting the run multiple ways. One front and one spacing is completely different fits from under and over spacing. and 8-man spacing. So you have to work back to front because the back is going to dictate the front and what fronts you can play. You guys, you have 4 interior gaps and two C gaps that we have to work with, and that's 10 personnel. So all the gaps have to be accounted for while also trying to keep vertical caps over everything. So yeah, that would be why.
Answer, man. And again, that's me just being a moron. I do 2 things in this off season every year. I read the wing tee just to get the if-then statements, and I always try to learn defense, what the defensive guys are doing, because you're doing the same thing on Twitter trying to figure out what the offensive guys are doing, so you're playing the mental game before the game.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my head around matchup quarters. I know I'm outing myself as being a complete moron, but it's just crazy to me. But I like it, like, in the concept. To me, quarters is the defensive run and shoot because you can match up with everything, and you just got to rep it over and over again. Man, when you put it with the tight front, I can't stand. So is there a or an offense when you're game planning and you see and you go, shit, I do not want to face this style of offense? Do you have one of those, or are you just like, F it, let's just roll with it?
Yeah, it's probably like the Gus Malzahn 20 personnel team that, they line up a billion different ways out of 20 personnel, and they get to it a billion different ways. So, they'll line up and then they'll shift completely to a different formation to where the strength changes, and then one guy will motion out and they run a billion different things, counter anything. So my ideal, if I'm ever an offensive coordinator, what I'll do is split zone, counter, play action, pass, flood. So now a lot of times where you're getting 20 personnel, that H-back is leading you to the ball. So they're running a crap ton of ISO, they're running a power, they're running counter. Whereas now if you're a split zone team, the H-back isn't necessarily hitting where the ball's hitting. It can if that running back hits all the way back, but, constantly these inside backers are seeing something come across their face, and whether or not you're telling them to read their guard over and over and over again, that's eye candy pre-snap and then now post-snap to where they're seeing an H-back fly across. So now if you're adding in play action pass and that H-back is coming across the ball, you're going to get all sorts of weird fits from your inside backers. So yeah, give that any kind of eye candy. It could completely takes me out of my game because I can no longer dictate what happens on the field because that kid's mind's already in a billion different places. I'm trying to get him set and put his blinders on. But as soon as you start doing this pre and post snap, that's 15, 16-year-old kids. So you're going to end up getting weird things going on.
I love that you said that because we're right here. Because that's something I realized is it could be that this is just my weird way of thinking, but we all have short attention spans now. Everybody. And it seems like motion is really messing with defenses and with kids because the moment they're like that dog and Up where it says instead of squirrel, he's like motion, and his eyes go away. And on defense, having really good eye discipline is crucial, especially at the high school level. And I remember you posted that. I asked something like that on Twitter, and that's what you gave. And then all your defensive buddies were like, "Shut the hell up, man! Why are you giving away? Why are you giving away the goods like that? That's great."
Absolutely, yeah. That's split zone counter. Like that's the team we played twice last year. Been in week 1 in the playoffs. That's what they ran, and they did it out of a billion formations, and they did it in empty with an H back, so they were still 20 personnel empty. And that guy was flying all over the place. And now if you have a quarterback that can run, so now you have, you're just adding another tier to it. So now you have QB counter, QB power, QB ISO. And that H-back is now doing this as well. And you're +1 in the box. And I have to figure out a way to get +1 in the box. But you're still spread. Yeah, that's a nightmare for me personally. Luckily, people are still lining up in 20 personnel and just running dive and ISO. So, I'll take that. But there are teams that are slowly catching on. And especially with Gus Malzahn coming to UCF, locally in Florida, you're going to see that trickle down, especially if he's putting up 50 a game, like I think he will in that conference. That will start trickling down. That already did when Auburn won the national championship and 20 personnel blew up. And I feel like every high school coordinator, took something from that offense, whether that was Wildcat or Sugar Huddle or whatever it was. They took something. It'll trickle down more and more. Because I think it's also the next evolution of the I front. Older coaches like, guys that were in the 50s, 60s, everything was, when they made the playbook, it was I form. And then they did everything, all their run fits based off of that. So, this is full flow, here's split flow, here's full flow, this is dive, this is ISO. Well, that's just the next evolution is an H-back, where now instead of stacked up under center, now he's just quarterbacks on the gun, here's an H-back. But those old school coaches are still doing the same thing. They kept their identity, but now it's, it's cool and, current with the times.
I'm glad you brought that up too, dude, because do you think, all right, we're getting deep here. Do you think offensive guys, if they want to get a one-up on the defense, they need to go back to those old school offenses? And the reason why I say that is because when I'm looking at all of the guys that we follow on Twitter and everybody like that, the defensive gurus, they have everything drawn up against 10 or 11 personnel. But it seems like the moment you bring up, like you said, the 12 personnel or the different motions and everything like that, like wing T or the flex bone, true offenses like that of the past, defensive coordinators really don't know what to do because they haven't seen it that much. Do you think if offensive guys, if they want to get an advantage, they may have to go back to the Homer Rice or Homer Smiths and all those old school books to see what they were doing to try to, because it's always a cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
Right now, and I feel like y'all are catching up and kind of passing us because this tight front, when you're a 10P, you're screwed. Like there's nothing you can, there's only a certain amount of runs you can run, and you're taking those away by being in the B gap. So now we have to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I knew that my first year because I had a flex bone team, and trying to figure out like preseason, trying to find knowledge on how to stop the flex bone was so hard to find. And when I did find stuff, it was almost like a different language. Like, what the crap is veer? I'm 24 years old. I don't know what veer is. I don't know what any of these weird old school terms are. Like, I don't know what any of this is. It's all hands drawn. Like you're trying to look at it on a computer, and it doesn't make sense. Now, to an older guy, they would see that. They would be like, oh, you just do this. You just put your 3-tick over here, and you just play double fours, and, you do all these things. And well, if you're new trying to find that, there's not a whole lot of old knowledge that's just readily available anymore. A lot of it is, 15,000 different pattern match coverages and, 3 high safety stuff and all sorts of, weird coverages. Whereas trying to stop a flex bone or a wing T team or inverted veer or whatever the crap you want to call it, it's hard to find. It's really hard to find. You have to really nail down preseason. And if you're trying to do it in season, there's no way you can catch up. You already have to play it. You already have to practice almost 2 weeks in advance for a flex bone triple option team. But if you're not doing that preseason and coming up with the game plan, you're in deep doo-doo. Yeah.
And you have to know the secret handshake to ask the questions for the old heads. So they know, because they're very secretive. They're like, no, I'm not giving this up. We didn't have the internet when we started. So you're going to have to go through the doors like we did. So I freaking love that. All right, let's see. We have some coaches in here. Terrence Gant, am I saying that name right? What's up, Tyler? You have a fan, a lot of them. Tony, 2 of my favorite Twitter followers in action. Raider says, if you're giving up explosive plays with 2 safeties, either your players aren't understanding their assignments or they aren't as good as the opposition. Tony says, agree, 2 read is always tricky, always scared of that corner biting. Luckily, I have a quarterback this year who can hit that honey hole shot when he triggers. What are your teaching cues for your kids? Like, if I'm brand new, I'm coming in and I'm a corner or something like that, what's like the number one thing you're trying to get through my head? And once that is through my head, this guy's going to be successful.
Yeah, ugly plays happen deep and outside. I stole that from Coach Bass. So always cap the verticals. But when you're teaching 2 read, there's a progression to 2 read. You can either make it really simple or really, really advanced. I mean, some guys run 2 read and they switch all the way out to like 10 yards. If I'm teaching 2 read the first time, we're only switching on bubbles, and then we're going to switch on bubble and arrows and flat routes, and then we're going to switch on 3-step outs, and then maybe that might be where we're at. So a lot of people say 5 yards. I hate 5 yards. There's so many routes break at 5 yards, and things get really muddled at 5 yards. So, if I'm starting out and trying to install 2 read for the first time, I'm going to start at that 1 yard line or that 1 step first. Because really what you're just trying to do is if you're tight and you're seeing a ton of 10 personnel, what's the first thing probably you're going to see is a ton of bubbles, especially when they see a safety at 10 to 12 yards. they're just going to come out and they're going to throw a bubble. Teams don't run bubbles on us. I don't think we gave up a bubble more than 4 yards last year. It just didn't happen. So, taking that's another comfort thing for a lot of 10 personnel spread teams is if they can't run the ball inside, well, now I'm just going to run the ball horizontally and I'm just going to pitch it outside and I'm just going to try to throw a bubble on you. You can't do that with two read anymore. So, stand on top and then hammer in the bubbles were the biggest thing. Like I said, slant bubble was the second biggest concept that we saw last year. So there's a progression to that. So we do 4 steps this year and the safety is the one making the call. At the same time, that's really only to the twin side. So if you get pro twins, so a tight end on one side and twins the other, you're pretty much playing quarters and loose man on the other side. I mean, that's what quarters ends up being a lot of times is just loose man. You're just playing cover zero, but now your guys are stacked way out there. Another thing is if you're getting a ball ran down your throat, you can't have your safeties at 10 to 12 yards. If you're playing a bigger offensive line and they're still beating the crap out of you with outside zone or inside zone somehow, you can't sit those guys at 10 to 12 yards. And a lot of 14, 15-year-olds, you put them at 10 to 12 yards, they tend to stay at 10 to 12 yards. They kind of float back there. So you have to be able to play real quarters where now you can reduce them all the way down to 8 yards and try to get them to run the alley. That's always the biggest thing I struggle with is, our safeties really triggering hard on runs. And a lot of that is eye discipline as well. So even two read, some people teach corners on two read that if they're butts to the sideline, they're reading 2 into the backfield to where now they're reading the quarterback's shoulders. The quarterback's shoulders are, horizontal. They can bite down on the bubble. If the quarterback's shoulders are vertical, now they're kind of staying on top and they're not going to bite down on the bubble as hard. That's another tier above, just playing to read the way I play it regularly. So it depends where you're at. There's different levels to it. It all depends on your comfortability with teaching it, the kid's comfortability, your position coach's comfortability, how much time's in it. All of that kind of plays into account.
How long do you stay in that before you introduce your next coverage? Because you said you had 4 or 5 coverages that you run?
Yeah, we run 2 read. We stayed in that for 3 days this spring. We'll probably stay in that for 3 days as well because we're also teaching kind of quarters on top of that. So if our strong safety sees, a tight end or an H-back, he's pretty much playing quarters or he's foxing the post through the Aranda term.
Let me hold you real quick. What's the difference between 2 read and quarters?
So quarters would be like if you just think about, spot drop and cutting the field in fourths.
Okay.
You can teach it cylinders. A lot of people teach it that way, just starting out first. We don't teach it that way. In fact, our quarters call, we don't even tell the kids that it's quarters. To them, it's mod, man on deep. So they take whoever the receiver is, if he's deep or if he's out, the only time they give him up if he's shallow. We teach it that way. We don't teach it regular quarter. So, our strong safety is the post player. So a lot of times, if you're an 11 personnel, we saw a ton of 6 to 7 man protection. So majority of the time, that tight end was staying in the block. You don't want to waste that kid. So you tell him to vice the post. So if the post is coming over top, of course, your safety is going to stay over top of that post. Well, now your strong safety is going to bite up underneath that, and now you're vice the post. You can either do that or you can rob the dig of one, whatever way you want to do that. So now your first install, you're teaching quarters, you're teaching mod, and you're teaching 2 read. So you're teaching hammer technique to the corners and all that. That's a lot up front. But we also use that in all of our trips checks. Like I said, we play poach, we play mini, we play 2 read to a ton of different things. And we kind of feel like it's kind of going downhill from there. It's really just an easy, slow jog after that because we don't. That's our only pattern match coverage. So our cover one's regular cover one. If you play cover 3, it's really fire zone coverage. We're just playing spot drop 3 where we're just telling the kid to get to the hash and kind of look for work. We stay pretty inexpensive with the rest of the coverages, but we know in game we're probably going to be in 2 read or quarters 80% of the time, if not more.
Okay, I like that. All right, so we've got some. Thanks for clearing that up, by the way, because I don't, like I said, defense. Coach wants to know, what is the idea in a forefront of shifting the strong side end over the tight end?
Well, to me, my strong side ends are total. At a small school, you might put your best kid at strong side end. So putting them over the tight end, for one thing, if they're trying to read someone over there, putting them into a 4 or a 6 is always a really wonky way of trying to get a quarterback. It makes the thing really muddled. That's one of the first things people do against flexible and triple option teams is they stick the ends in 4s because now that quarterback's kind of guessing, is this guy pinching or is he flying out wide? So putting him over a tight end does the same thing if they're trying to read that guy. If they're trying to release that tight end, obviously you're going to be really sticky on that. I asked my Sam to be able to be physical enough with a tight end and also play 2-1 twins. So, I mean, we're very expensive with our outside linebackers. Those are our two best athletes by far. They both had 9 tackles in our Friday night game. So we asked that Sam linebacker to be able to play on a tight end, be able to, kick up out of a base if he's getting base blocked or reach, while also being fast enough to play over 2, which, you're not going to have 11 kids that can do that. Luckily, we have a couple that can, so we tend to not move that end all the way out over the tight end.
Okay. All right. Coach Larry says he's loving this information. Coach Allen says, thanks for sharing the things that bother your defense. Sing and OC, I'm trying to advance my offense. And I think do you ever want to get into on the offensive side, or are you just like, nope, I'm defensive coordinator through and through. I'm going to stay on this side as I make my way up the ranks?
Yeah, I would absolutely love to make the jump one day, but I would love to do this at the highest level I can and then make the jump over one day. I keep a notebook of like things that really piss me off that offensive coordinators do. Like, I'll get to Saturday after breaking down film, I was like, oh, that really sucked to go against. Let me write this down. My offense will pretty much just be every single thing that I hate combined into one super offense, and I'm just going to run that at people. Really, the biggest thing for an offensive coordinator is just like every defense has a rule. Every call has a rule. If you can figure out what coverage you're in and what that rule is, and you can break it, that's the easiest way to do it. You just break every single rule that they have, and you're just going to get complete chaos on the other side of the ball. So yeah, and that comes down both sides of the ball, just trying to break the other team's rules as quick as you can and start trying to figure out what those rules are. That's what you want to do. I of course know all of my rules. So being an offensive coordinator, if I saw someone that was a 2-read team, I would automatically know what rules to break. If I, was playing a tight team, I would know exactly where to run the ball over and over again. So yeah, absolutely. Would love to make a switch one day. What
I found, and this, I just stumbled upon it talking to a guy smarter than me. He's now at Clemson. It's 2x2. Where do you set your linebacker on the same side of the back or opposite the back?
The outside linebacker?
Yeah.
So the outside linebacker away from the running back would be in the fit. So he would play, apex or maybe even a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage. The outside linebacker or to the running back would be out of the fit. So he would play sometimes 90%. But in high school and college ball, you can kind of fudge those outside linebackers and play them almost like a 5-2 or a little bit tighter than you regularly would. At least I can. I got that from Jim Leonard because, at the NFL, if you're not rerouting and trying to mess up timing, you're going to get picked apart. Whereas the college and high school level, how exact is that timing? It's not as exact, especially at the high school level. So sometimes you can kind of get away with not rerouting.
Unless you're the R4, then timing is everything, and you have a stopwatch on and know by the 10th of the second. But what I found worked is I would figure out where you're putting that linebacker. Because I know if he goes vert, he's got to carry at least number 2 vertical a little bit. And I would motion the back to the other side. So I'd start him on one side and then motion him to the other side, and no one's in the flat. And then I would just dump it off. And that worked for a little bit. And then all of a sudden teams got smart. And I was like, that's not working anymore. I got to figure something else out. So what do you do? Like, let's say that exact scenario. What's your adjustment for that?
Well, I always this is kind of funny. So, all spring we're playing against our offense, and they keep on throwing flare to the R, and they just keep dumping it off in the flats over and over again. And my kids are like looking at me like, what the crap? And I was like, oh, that's bad. So FaceTime. Let's see if I can set this up again.
Hey, that's live, baby. That's live.
I know. Getting crazy. There you go. I'm not going to touch it again. So, if you're an offensive guy, it's going to piss you off, but I've never seen an offensive coordinator that's able to throw flats the entire game all the way down the field. They don't have the patience to do it. So, we're going to rally. That's part of the overall philosophy of playing top down. We'll rally to the flats. If they want to throw a flare or a bubble, we only saw our flare 5 times last year. We didn't see it a whole bunch, but if they want to throw it out there, we'll rally. We'll just completely make the tackle over and over and over again, rally, and we'll just continue to, force you to drive the ball down the field. I would love to see a cut up of an offensive coordinator throwing bubble all the way down the field 10 consecutive times. I would kill for that.
You're right. I think I call it big dick energy. Offensive coordinators, after they throw it 2 times, are like, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
I've got to YOLO it and just rip it. Or if it is the offensive coordinators who can do that, again, like you've referenced before, it's 14 and 15-year-olds. That 14 or 15-year-old quarterback doesn't have the patience to just check it down over and over and over again. So he's like, YOLO, I'm just going to throw it down the field. And you're right. I've seen it happen one time in South Carolina, and it's from the coach that's now coaching at Clemson. He won like 3 state championships in 5 years, and then he went to Clemson, and he won a couple of national championships. That's the only one I've seen, because you're right. We are an impatient position. We got a question from Coach. How do you handle wide receiver stacks? Do you see that? And if you do, what kind of check do you have on that?
Yeah, there's a couple ways of doing it. We kind of fall camp, we have 2 ways of doing it. We just call 1 or 2. So you just tell that corner and that safety, they can do it different ways. It's all up to them on whether they want to call 1 or 2. So you can just say 1, the corner's going to take 1, 2, the corner's going to take 2, and then the third way of playing it would be like traditional quarters or 2 read, to where the safety's taking the first way in, or the first guy in, corners are taking the first guy out. So if you do, you're doing this or different ways. Now they're just playing like regular quarters, and they're just letting that switch vertical play out, and then they're just playing on top of everything. So 3 ways to play it. If I have to call it, I can yell out 1-1, 2-2, or if we're in 2 reads, they just play it regularly like quarters. So a couple different ways.
Okay.
And if I was an offensive coordinator, I would run stacks constantly, and I would motion a stack, and I would force that communication to happen really fast. We don't get it a ton. But yeah, it's another way to try and it's another way to try and break rules. Because if you don't have those rules, if it's week 1 and you only can play 1, well then now if you're an offensive coordinator, hey, corner's taking 1, so now I can do things to mess up that rule. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I love it, man. Do you ever kick your jack over to the trip side versus 3x1 11P? What Bama called mint closed?
What was that last part?
What Bama, I'm guessing Alabama, called mint close.
Do I ever kick the jack over to
the trip side versus 3x1 11P?
No, because typically my jack is my best pass rusher. And if you know anything about the 3-4, how often are 3-4 defensive coordinators sending boundary pressure with their weak side outside linebacker? Like 90% of the time, if not more. So that's the one thing about the 3-4 is you're going to be constantly sending that jack outside linebacker or that will inside linebacker. Sometimes you obviously have to have a way to send field pressure some way. But getting that outside linebacker on a 1-on-1, especially if you're like a full slide team. So if you're 4x1 and you're full sliding the other way, you might say as an offensive coordinator, well, we picked that up. Well, I'm going to take my best pass rusher against your worst pass protector, and I'm going to create havoc that way. So typically not moving that guy over. I love sending that weak side outside linebacker. That's actually my best player. That's why I stick my best player. So he's typically our best pass rusher. He led the team in sacks last year. He'll probably do it again this year. So I wouldn't really typically move him over, at least for me personally.
Okay. Coach Smith wants to know, when you're playing quarters versus 11, are you having your safety as the C-gap fitter to tight end H-back side?
Yes, I am. And now you can get a call later on, or you can actually teach it to where if you can teach your outside linebacker, I would like to teach it this way personally, that the safety is going to make the fit right at the end of the day. That's the way I would personally like to do it. So if the outside linebacker, if he's getting kicked out, he's going to try to reach inside now, and he's going to try to either under or overcut it to where he can get the C-gap, and that safety is going to make that fit right. If you can do it that way without having to call and coach your kids up, that's a really, really good way of doing it. Now you're just gap exchanging it. The same way that the tight front is a gap exchange under front, you could do that the same way an 11 person on the C-gap, is if you can teach that safety to make the fit right at the end of the day. That's a really good way. That's a really good mix-up call for people that are trying to run into the C-gap is, now you're dipping that outside linebacker in, and that safety's spending outside.
Oh, yeah, that messes with you. That messes with you. That's going in my notebook.
We try.
All right, Coach Johnson wants to know, how does he handle tight bunch with a tailback to the bunch side? Does he stay in the tight front? How would he play quarterback veer, duo read, quarterback duo, any kind of read action with the quarterback in that situation?
Yeah, 4x1. This is actually a problem that I've ran into in the past couple of months. If you listen to a rando or a lot of college defensive coordinators, what do they see constantly when they get 4x1? Well, especially bunch, they get same side runs constantly. I haven't seen I've seen one team run same side runs, and I talked to a couple of other defensive coordinators, and it's just not as prevalent at the high school level. So a lot of times, they're trying to run same side zone to where they're just mashing the ball down at that bunch. Because that's the short side of the field. So they're just mashing the ball down, whether that's same side power, that could be, same side QB ISO, if you want to do a quarterback run. So originally, if it's 4x1, fall camp, we like slanting to that. We don't always like full line slanting at a tight, but we can full line slant to that to where now we're getting a 5-tick post snap. Another way is we have a tight adjustment, which is called, Brandon calls it single or slide, and we just call it slide, to where now you're just pulling a string, you're just pulling the strong end to a 5-tick, and you're getting into under, but you're still playing ball fits. So now you just have a 5-tick that side. So if you're getting same side runs, you're getting now you have a hard edge, especially if you're a bunch, or if it's condensed bunch, to where now it almost looks like 11 personnel on this bunch. Well, I hate that formation. It's another formation I hate, is condensed bunch. And now there's all kinds of weird gaps, especially if you throw it in. There's another one that's in the book.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, there's another one. There's another one. So, yeah, slanting to it, setting a 5-tick there pre-snap. There's a couple of different ways to do it. You can also slide that weak side end if you're getting gap scheme to that side. You can slide that end, that 4-eye, into a 3, and now you can either block back on a 3 or you can try to scoop a 3. Either way, that's the hardest blocks for an offensive tackle or a center to make. Yes. So if you're that by one side, you don't necessarily need a really hard edge that way. You can slide that 4-eye into a 3, and now you can chase tail all the way around if you're getting quarterback ISO, QB power, QB duo, things like that to that 4x1 side. If you're getting runs to that side, now you can put a 3-tick there, and now you can kind of slant to it while also trying to chase it on the backside. So there's a couple ways of doing it.
Okay. Good stuff, man. You know what I like, all football coaches? When we don't have anything to write down, we close our eyes and we visualize. Everybody does that. I look up at the ceiling and try to do it, and then to me, it's like this is our Rain Man moment. We just zone out and we know what's going here. This goes here. It's amazing. I love it. That's just me being weird.
Could you imagine being a random person listening and there's some guy doing this and saying a bunch of words that you don't understand?
Come in and be like, what the hell is this? I'm getting out of this stream.
Yeah.
Coach,
or something.
Yeah. Coach Brown wants to know, any thoughts on teaching the tight front quarter stuff without flipping any players, essentially playing with the right side players and the left side players, teaching field and boundary rules for all? You answer that. I'm going to go turn on my fan. It is hot as piss in here.
No worries. Yeah, that's how we actually do it, in fall camp. Now, obviously, you have calls that are to the tight end, to the open side, to the back, away from the back, and things like that. That's another wrinkle that you can throw at offensive coordinators is, base your field and your bench team, and that's, how you get lined up and all of your base stuff. But now you're sending stuff and setting the strength to the passing strength or away from the passing strength. One of the first things that offensive coordinators like to do is where's the defense setting the strength? That's the first thing I want to find out. Where's your 3-tech? Where are you putting your nickel and things like that? Where's your weak side outside linebacker? Well, base, so 50% of the time you're just a field and a boundary team. And then you get the calls, and now these guys are switched completely even because there's a tight end, and now you're switched again to where the pressure's coming away from the back, and you have multiple different ways of setting the strength. I get that question all the time. It's how are you setting the strength? Well, I set the strength multiple ways if I can, to the tight end, away from the tight end, to the back, away from the back, and then, our base way of doing it, field and bench. So the more ways you can do that, it's definitely good.
All right. How annoying is the sugar huddle? And have you gone up against the sugar huddle?
Only in practice, because my offensive coordinator, my head coach, is a psychopath and likes to put I hate his offense so much. So he sugar huddles sometimes. Any way that you can limit communication between me and my guys, I'm a kind of the way I was taught is that whoever has the pen last is going to end up pretty good. So, in an ideal world, you're really slow out of the huddle. I can see what personnel is out there. I can see what formation you're going to get into, especially in high school. I mean, some offensive coordinators are uber formation tendency based. Sometimes I throw out down a distance completely or hash completely. All I care about is the formations you get out. Well, now if you're sugar huddling, that starts to get a little wonky, and now you're having to play really even, really, really base, and like we just talked about, now you're just trying to set strength to the field and the boundary. Now you're kind of guessing of like, I hope they line up in this formation, so I'm going to send boundary pressure or I'm going to send field pressure, and it makes you play really base. The good thing is, tight 4 is really, really base. I mean, you have 2 4 eyes and a 0. You have 2 inside linebackers that are in 30s. You have 2 apex outside linebackers, and you're playing quarters. So, like, it doesn't matter how many different ways you line up, I can still play my base, which is why we do that for 3 days. And I feel like there's enough checks built into the base to where I can end up pretty good at the end of the day. There's some things I don't necessarily like seeing in my base, but my kids can still get lined up to it.
Okay. All right. I've been dabbling with the sugar huddle. I kind of like it.
All kinds of one. Dude, that's another thing. If I was an offensive coordinator, I'd sugar huddle. I would go on 2. I'd silent count. I'd have like 50 different ways of like manipulating the cadence. Especially us, where we pre-snap. We try to pre-snap stem like 40 to 50% of the time. If you're like messing with the cadence and you're getting lined up a bunch of different ways, especially if they're trying to flip the passing strength and not necessarily the field and the boundary. Absolutely, I would absolutely sugar huddle. Or I wouldn't sugar huddle. No one should pick that up.
Never do that. Put that. All right, Marcus wants to know, how do you defend the mesh concept as a defensive coordinator? Trick question, you can't. It's always open.
The traditional thought is like you want to play zone to it, but if you actually like watch the tape on it, it almost works out the same way of trying to chase it all the way around the field and playing zone. That's a concept that on the board, and like if you look at the routes, they're not going to look really pretty. But the thing about mesh is, to me, I see mesh talked about constantly. One of my guys I love, it's like mesh is his favorite thing. High school quarterbacks are going to struggle with dudes doing this, and there's 15,000 guys doing this, and a lot of times, that's a pretty long. He's going to have to pat the ball at least a little bit unless you're condensing the formation. Now, if you're doing it in a condensed set, that's a little more difficult. But you tell your inside linebackers always to beat the crap out of crossers, and if they call it, they call it. But we're going to start off by beating and mugging the crap out of people. So if I can play press on your guys and try to mess up the timing or get reroutes anyways, and then they're crossing and then they get a second reroute, that's the whole reason, you try to attack protections with 4 or 5 people different ways. If I can get pressure and the guy and your quarterback's looking at the middle of the field and he's got guys doing this in front of his eyes, that's a hard throw to make. I quarterbacks, at least at high school level, I see kind of really struggle with it. But that's a concept that, looks really good on the whiteboard and everything. But if you can do it, absolutely, I would throw that a million different ways.
Well, I found that, the mesh is usually either the second or the third read. Usually if you do it Mummy's way, it's like corner, then the back, then the mesh. But a lot of high school guys just want to throw the mesh. I agree, though. When we ran it, we would run it in the spring and then 7-on-7. And then when it came time for like fall ball and reinstalling, we would sit down and be like, hey, do we feel good about this? Do we like it? And if we didn't, we would just get rid of it. It's like, we're not even.
Yeah. And if you're running creepers where, the offensive coordinator and that quarterback never knows where that fourth guy is coming from. So we're like now his 5 techs, which are real outside linebackers, if you're a creeper guy, 1 5 tech's dropping out and the other's coming, or, you're dropping out all sorts of people. If he's trying to 3-step that as fast as he can and guys are dropping out where he's not knowing, he obviously looks over to try to hit a mesh, and now there's the 5 tech dropped out into the mesh. Well, that's another way of playing it. That's why we're constantly very, very varied with where we send the fourth person and, who's dropping out.
I like that. From a defensive standpoint, I like it. From an offensive standpoint, I hate it. Y'all. What? Okay, so riddle me this. What is the difference between creepers and stems? Or there's 2 different types of stunts and blitzes, right? Help me out. People call it different
people call it different things. Sim pressures are just simulated pressures. Creepers, in Aranda's language, a creeper is anything he labels as a quarterback. So Theismann, Orton, all that. It's a 4-man pressure with someone dropping out.
Why Orton? Kyle Orton was like semi decent. What at Denver and the Bears, and then that's it.
Yeah, you're sending the pressure to the open side. So can you think of another quarterback with O?
Brock Osweiler, or however you say his name.
Horrific. Literally, contract was like bought by the Browns for cash, pretty much, in a draft pick. Yeah, I'm a Browns fan, so I know Brock. That's a struggle. Good luck getting anyone to realize that who's not a Texans fan.
That's Knowles guy at Arizona State. Dude, 6'8" statues to just slinging the ball in college.
I know. Osweiler, Orton. I can't think of another one. You might be able to think of another one off your top of your head, but yeah, I hate the quarterback position. But simulated pressures and creepers to me are pretty much the same thing. Simulated pressure, you're just simulating pressure to one side. So you might show overload to one side, but you're bringing pressure the other way, and it's usually a 4-man pressure.
I'm looking it up. Football players. Bill O'Brien. There's a lot of O'Briens, O'Connells, and Connors. Neil, good Lord. Yeah, you're right. That's the closest one, man.
I call it oops. I just do this. On the open side, I go oops. Like no one understands. Like oops, all the kids know to do that, and they echo it back. Instead of Orton, they would that completely go over their head. I have some guys that I got to week 8 last year, and my cornerback asked me, where the guard was on the field. Like, I get kids that don't play Madden or anything like that, let alone whose Kyle is.
Yeah, it's like, come on, guys. Play some Madden. All right, Johnny wants to know, how do you handle 11P personnel? Or, I'm sorry, how do you handle 11P tight split teams like what the Rams do formation-wise?
Okay, so, nasty splits and things like that, the first thing is, we're going to have a tube alert for almost all of our coverages, and that's the corner telling the overhang, the outside linebacker, hey, you're danger. So, you're probably going to get a mesh route. You're going to get dragged, something behind you. So you got to be out fast to reroute that. So, that's a tube alert, that corner saying, hey, you just have someone underneath. If you're getting 11 personnel, though, we're going to get into all of our under, post-snap, pre-snap stuff. You can still play 2 read. Another thing that I really like that I haven't completely done yet, but I've thought about a ton and talked about with a lot of defense coordinators, is inverting it, playing, inverted cover 2. So now, you're taking the corner out of the fit, and you're just playing it the opposite way, where your safeties are typically better tacklers in space anyways. So now you're just doing this whenever you get nasty splits. That's something that I would love to do. I'm thinking mulling it over for this fall potentially is playing inverted to nasty splits. Another thing is, like I said, Theismann and Orton, anytime you can get a 5-tick over there, pre or post snap, that's absolutely what you want to do, whether you're slanting it or you're putting in a pre or post snap or you're stemming it. That's what I would typically do. We kind of treat 11 personnel the same, but that condensed split stuff, especially to one side, is, that's trouble, because a lot of times as soon as you slide that X over, that corner is going to be peeking in the backfield, especially when he's already 2 reads, so now the tight end's there. Now there's a wide receiver side cover. He's kind of peeking in the backfield, and eye candy. All of that's eye candy as well.
I love that. So what I'm hearing is motion, tight ends. That's going to be very bad against any, not just the tight, but just like any defense in general.
Yeah, well, now you're making, anytime you can create extra gaps pre or post snap, that's how you do it. Anytime you can create extra gaps with condensed splits, so 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 21 personnel. So now you got extra gaps, or you're trying to force a corner to tackle. There's the pre-snap or post-snap would be any kind of gap scheme, counter, dart, power, all of that. Now you're making it post-snap. As soon as you make those extra gaps, you have to find ways to account for it. And a lot of times those extra gaps on the outside are accounted for with guys that we don't necessarily love being in the box and playing that way, because that's not naturally what they're for. So we don't see a ton of condensed stuff, because every offensive coordinator thinks they're lane kick, and then they want to spread out in 10 personnel and throw the ball over the field and run a billion different ways of running inside zone and dressing it up. But if you're that flexible, absolutely. But with how much 10 personnel stuff we see, if you see me in tight and you're like, okay, I know the answer is condensed stuff, and 11 personnel. Well, that's plan D on my playbook. That's the kids haven't practiced that since fall camp because we've been killing teams with 10 personnel all year. And now we get to a tight team. Well, yeah, condensed formations are great and counter and all that's great, but that's not necessarily my best and base plan. So now you get assignments cut off all the time. Kids forget where to go, who to block, what routes to run, and things like that because that's just not naturally what they've been doing for 5-10 weeks or however long when you ever get me in the schedule.
I like that.
So it's expensive. Yeah, it's expensive.
Well, that's going down in my notebook. And I have another O. I can't believe I didn't think about this off the top of my head. JT O'Sullivan, man. The quarterback school. Friend of the showcast, man. Forget Orton or whatever his name is. It's O'Sullivan now.
O'Sullivan. My kids would get confused if they get the S call, though.
Gotcha. All right, we got a next one. My son has a question. What would you do against Emory Henry formation at Gun Monster? The old Steve Spurrier, like 3-3-3. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't. So 3-bag?
No. It's like a center guard. Then you have like a tackle, and so it's like
split out wide.
Yeah, so it's like three groups of three.
We just played a team for the first ever time Friday. Did that exact same thing. I didn't know what it was. I just labeled it BS. There's a name to that. It's a Steve Spurrier formation.
Yeah, it's Emory and Henry.
Huh. Yeah, they ran it 3 times in the opponent scout that I saw. So, we weren't too worried about it. If you're doing things like that and that's only 1 or 2 times, I'm only going to practice that. I'm a big about matching the practice reps and practice time with how much you guys run things. So if you run inside zone 60% of the time out of 10 personnel, I want to practice against inside zone and 10 personnel 60% of the time. So if you're just running that formation 2 times, I might just, gloss over it, make sure we're not going to get deep vertical. All I did was I would just flex out my outside linebacker. We stayed in whatever our base call was. So we would end up with 2 ends over or outside shade of the tackles. Typically, if we were in tight, inside linebackers would stay on the box, and then the safeties would apex, and they would run they would run quarters pretty much to it. That's what we would do. They only threw bubbles out of it, and I was worried about the fade, the pump, and then obviously the fade. So we just told them to stay on top.
Yeah, man. Dude, you got to – what's old is new, and the only reason why I know that formation is because in NCAA 14, that formation was in there. Me and my buddies used to have games where that's the only play or the only formation we could run against each other. So, yeah, man. He made a killing like that at Florida.
Did he? I never knew that. Whenever I see wonky formation like that, I just label it BS. And then, I pray that you don't run more BS formations because then it goes BS1, BS2, BS3, and then things get really weird. So,
have you gone up against the lonesome polecat?
I have not. I've heard stories about it. I have not. I don't get that many. Luckily, I don't get that many wonky stuff. Like, I loved as a player running that stuff. Running swinging gay and all sorts. I loved all of that. I would do it more. I know how much I stress about little things like that, and constantly. I might only practice it a couple times in the week, but it's going to be here throughout the week, and then like pregame, I'm going to be thinking, oh crap, they're going to run this polecat or they're going to run swing gate or something wonky, and I just pray that my kids get lined up right. So if I'm an offensive coordinator, that's absolutely, I would throw stuff like that in every single week just to torture someone. Is there a defensive equivalent of doing that to offensive coordinators?
To me, it would be, I think there was that 10-1 type of defense where it was essentially everyone's got a man or a gap. Like you would line up, I could be completely wrong, but I want to say you line up everybody in a gap. Then you have like a middle linebacker who's got the running back, and then you have like a free safety in the back that just cleans up. And I want to say some team in Texas used it and like just destroyed everybody. So it's like if I have the C gap, but there's also a tight end, well, I'm going to destroy this tight end. I'm not going to let him get off the ball. My only thing is I'm just destroying this guy. And it just messes up passes and anything like that, man. It's crazy.
That sounds kind of awesome. The only thing I can think of that would be close to it is like teams that run amoeba stuff. So like all the guys, you ever seen that? Guys are just like running around pre-snap, and then you have like 4 or 5 different guys that are hitting gaps weird ways and guys dropping out. That'd be like the only thing I can think of. Some offensive coordinators I know hate bear teams. Teams are like,
I hate it.
No matter what, are running 5-2 bear stuff. No matter what, they're running the old 46 stuff. They don't care if you're a 10 personnel team. I know that's kind of a pain, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And there you go, like Tony. I'm glad I got it right, man. Yes, the 10-1 for the win. It totally messes up everything U-style football. It's just like, it's legitimately man-on-man basketball. No help, no nothing. Like, you're the dude. I am going to destroy you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
That's awesome. That makes me want to put it in. You know, these guys probably shouldn't have told me that, because I'm going to come to my head coach with like a sheet and saying we have to run this awesome defense.
Yeah, this is our lonesome polecat, our Emery and Henry. Coach wants to know, when you're looking for your nose guard, are you looking for a quick leverage kid or a fireplace strength kid?
I have a couple different thoughts on this. So down the depth chart is going to change completely. So we have 4 different techniques that our zero is going to play. You know, he can play lag, which is, you know, he's just falling off to wherever the center is blocking, so he's taking the cutback. We have push, which is the opposite. So wherever the center's trying to drive him away from the nose, is going to play over top of that. Both of those require kind of sturdier guys. We can naturally 2-gap as well if we have a real good stud there. You can just, you know, we just call it board drilling pretty much. So we just push them, knocking them back, and then playing A to A, lock, peek, and shed. And then we slant as well. So we have 4 separate calls and ways of doing that within tight. And down the depth chart, we have guys that can do different things. So our number 1 typically is going to be my best player. I love ruining centers' lives. It's like my favorite thing to do is trying to play multiple different A-gap games. So if you put a stud in front of him.
What a jerk.
I know. My best defensive lineman, and you're already a step behind because you have to snap the ball. You have to deal with that. And now stemming pre-snap. So we line up in even spacing. So there's a 1 over there. The center's like, oh, thank God, I finally get a break. And then we snap, and all of a sudden it's a 0 pre-snap. You're like, oh, crap, now I have to try and reach this guy. We do that pre-snap. And then now we're walking down inside linebackers in both A-gaps, or we're slanting across your face post-snap, and we're bringing a guy on the other side of the formation. I love ruining centers, you know, everything. If you can get into a center set, it's the easiest way to you know, screw up an offense. So, you know, that's my number 1 guy. Typically, he can do all of those things. He may not be big into slanting. The second guy, though, is going to be my wonky kid. My really, you know, we actually have a 140-pound nose guard who also plays inside linebacker that we put in there, and he just slants, and he actually had 2 sacks last game from just like being, it's a completely different feel from a center. Now you're going to someone big and beefy and sturdy, and now you have someone that's just super quick off the ball. So we'll go down our depth chart and we switch those guys out. It's also heavy on technique, but not super heavy on concepts learned. So we don't do a ton of that. Some guys, when they pull the string and get into over and under, they ask that nose to slide into a 3. We don't do that. We only keep him into a 1, a shade, or a 0. So he's really only ever going to be in those 3 things. So he just has to get really good at his technique. So if we have a kid who's a freshman or sophomore, has a really good body, but not necessarily that, doesn't have it all up here, we'll just, you know, kind of stick him that nose for a year until he gets his feet underneath him.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And I find that if you can jack a center up at least twice, maybe in the first or second drive, that snap is all over the place, man.
There's nothing sweeter than fumbled snaps or high snaps. There's nothing greater in this world. That's like, as soon as he does that a couple times, you kind of know, okay, I got him. Like, now it's time to start ramping it up. It doesn't matter what you're running, gap scheme, off tackle, throw at the ball. Like, he still has to snap you the ball, so I'm just going to try to get into his head as many different ways.
Yeah. All right. Coach Mark wants to know, how do you handle 2x2 pistol formation where the number 2 receiver motions across and the base plays inside zone? Do you roll coverage to cover 3 or slide a linebacker outside, or just sit in the defense called?
So motion all the way across the formation, or
let's go with just motion across, like a fast motion.
So if we're in just tight quarters, a lot of that time we're going to just be sending that outside linebacker, because his role is, if the wide receiver split, I'm going to be apex. If he's a tight end, I'm going to be in a 7 tech, so I'm going to be outside shade of the tight end. But if he motions all the way across, you know, now he pretty much becomes that weak side outside linebacker. Like I said, we send that guy majority of the time, 90% of the time. So he's probably coming off the edge. If we're in tight, I already feel really good about that. But if we're in under and over, and if the ball's being ran at the B gap, yeah, we just rock and roll. We play post. So we would play 2-8 to the twin side. The safety would start to shadow, making sure it's not fly sweep. And then he would play vertical or 3, or he would pretty much become the post safety. So if you ran, PAP and it was double post, he would vice the post underneath it. Or if you were a dig team, he would rob the dig as well. So you can do different things with that safety. We don't necessarily rock and roll, but we would stay in our quarters base, at least fall camp rules. If you're in cover 1, that changes. You can rock and roll them, or you can slide it. There's different ways of doing it. We would rock and roll if we were in a middle field close coverage. But if we're in quarters, we'd like to try and stay in quarters.
Okay. And he wants to know also, what if you motioned across and that guy turned into a flat player? Kind of like, how you have the H-back that goes across and then goes into the flat. Do your rules change, or do they stay the same based on that knowledge?
So the rules would change, or the rules would stay the same in that the outside linebacker to that side would be our curl flat player. So he would take the deeper route behind him. Obviously, if there was a 10-yard curl or an out route behind him, he would try to sit in that hole as long as possible and then rally down to the flat. But if he was fast into the flat, he would hammer down on that. Our outside linebacker to that side would be our curl flat player to that side. Yes, sir.
Okay. God, what? Sir? Come on, man. Come on.
Maybe I'll pick it up here.
Yeah. Justin wants to know, how do you adjust to a tight end and wing, and what problems does it give you?
A tight end
and a wing on the same side.
Oh, so yeah, that would be to me, that's another nasty split. So when I say nasty split, it's pretty much anything condensed to one side and, probably twins to the other side. So that could be in trips where, they're 3 open to one side and the X is now, he's nasty. That would be nasty to me as well. But with a tight end and an H or a wing, we, like I said, with Hobbs, is going to play a ton of under pre-snap and then try and slant to it post-snap. That's like the answer for everything, because if you're running gap scheme to that tight end, which a lot of teams are, they're going to reduce it and they're going to say, we're going to try and force the safety or the corner to make a tackle. A lot of times they're going to be pulling that guard or that tackle from the other side. So if I can get that guy into a 3 and chase tail, or I can slant to the wing in that tight end and then bring the pressure either on top of it or away from it toward now my best. That would be our will outside linebacker. That's our second best player a lot of the time, or our second best pass rusher. If he's chasing tail and he's usually athletic enough to bend with a guard that's pulling, even if that ends in a 4-eye or a 5 to that side, he can bend the ball back. So now, you're slanting to where the ball's trying to hit and bringing pressure away, or you can also bring pressure right on top and slant away. There's kind of both ways of doing it. I like mixing it up in both ways. If one way's not working, just get into the next part of your playbook.
Okay. I like that. And coaches, I don't know if you know this, but Coach actually has a course on the 3-4 tight front. Coach, could you walk us through it? I'm going to switch to the next screen so they can see this. This is an in-depth course right here that if you are an offensive coach, you might want to give a look at, because I promise you're going to see a lot of this. We have actually done this on the defensive side on our team going to it. It is a pain in the ass, and I'm just going to go ahead and switch to it. Walk us through this, man. What do you get when you in this course?
So to me, it's pretty much the entire Aranda and my playbook transposed. So I took the Aranda playbook. We run pretty much all of his stuff, from his personnel packages to all of his base stuff to how he attacks fronts or pressures and things like that. So we have his peso personnel, his 2-4-5 personnel package. We have his big personnel package where he puts an extra D-tackle on the field and plays middle of field close coverage. So we have all of that, except I kind of transposed it. And the biggest thing I learned when trying to learn the Aranda system is you have to cut a lot of the fat off of a lot of these D1 coordinator systems. There's no way you can just take the Saban system or the Aranda system and just put it straight into a high school defense, especially if you're a 1-2 team with limited staff. So we're very expensive with our base stuff. So all of our tight stuff has all the bells and whistles. We have our box check to bunch. We have our trips check where we play poach, which is his goal. We have all of that. But then, if I'm playing cover 3 and if I'm forced to play cover 3, I'm playing spot chop cover 3. I'm not playing with shift player and pattern matching or anything like that. And if I'm playing cover 1 or 1 rat, it's going to be a really, really simple way of doing that. So to me, when I took the Aranda system, I kind of cut a lot of the fat off to where I think my kids could run it. And then I also changed the language. The language is the biggest thing. We talked about Kyle Orton and who the heck would know Kyle Orton. To me, Orton, the call is oops. For Theismann, it's teeth. I just point at my teeth. Kids understand that way more than, any of the quarterbacks. To a lot of his facial personnel stuff, the stuff seems really wordy when I go through it, but you're not teaching as many concepts or rules to kids. You're just telling them, hey, this is where you go. You try to separate the front from the back so your defensive linemen don't have to memorize a call and they don't have to understand what's going on behind them, or even at the second level, they're just playing ball. You're just telling them exactly what gap to go to. If I say belly and I rub my belly, the ends know wherever front I called, they have to get into the B gaps, so they have to slant to the B gaps. So a lot of it is just transposing the language into a high school and more edible package. But then I also go through everything that you would need to really run the defense from philosophy. I think philosophy is important. It's kind of the boring part of whenever you get into clinics, you're like, yeah, whatever, I get it. You're going to talk about philosophy. If you don't have a reason of the why and the how of what you call, then you don't really have a system. You kind of have just a collection of play calls. I learned that pretty early on. If you can't figure out the why and the how of each call, you're just collecting plays and you're just guessing in the game days. It's really easy to learn a system that's fun. Absolutely, it's fun. But if you're trying to call it, if you can't figure out the how and why, you're going to struggle. So I go through the philosophy, the run fits, all the tight stuff, and how I problem solve the tight stuff. So how you offensive coordinators are attacking it. I go through all of that on how I problem solve. I get to my plan B and C. I also go through all of our coverages. From my 2-read stuff, I go through the progression of, you could run it really simply, you could run it really expensive, and you could have all the bells and whistles to it, however you want to do it. Attacking protections with pressures, I have a list where all of my pressures, I have what it's good against. So whether you're a bob team or a full slide team or now a half slide team, I have it charted to where, what calls for the week I'm going to pull out of it, and then I can match it up. So now I'm not guessing in game full slide. Oh crap, what kind of calls do I need to get in a full slide to where I can get my best pass rushers on your running back or get free guys completely. So you'll be able to run through the entire defense through it. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and talk it over. Everything is from guys like Zass or Randa or other 3-4 guys. I think it's if you're looking at it, you think, oh crap, that's really expensive. I can't run the tight front. People talk to me all the time. I can't play a react attack and tight front. I don't have guys at LSU or Alabama or Georgia. Like I said, cut the fat off. Even this, if you just take one part of it and you just take the tight stuff, or if you just take the pressures or the coverages, cut the fat off, use it for your kids out of any system. Cut the fat off, teach the techniques the way you need to teach them. If you have a position coach that can only teach slant and angle, then sit in 4s and slant, but you can still play tight here or there. But if you have a defensive line coach who can play react attack, then do it that way. There's 100 different ways. I think the system's flexible enough. I already went through 4 different ways with the nose. So if you have a light nose and you're at a small team and your nose is small, then slant them. There's no reason that you need to play lag or push or anything like that. So the system's flexible enough, I believe, for any team or any division that you're at.
Okay. And you said get in touch with you. What's the best way? Is it through Twitter?
Yeah, Twitter. That would be at Coach T Manus. Coach T Manus. My email is Manus, MANES _Tyler @yahoo.com. You can email me or DM me on Twitter. Anything, I'm an open book. I learned this all through other people. And if I don't have an answer, I'll ask someone who probably does have the answer and try to figure it out for you. So completely open.
Okay. I dropped his Twitter in the chat. If you're interested in the Tite Front course and everything, it is the first link in the description or the very first pinned comment. Coach, I appreciate you being here, man. I appreciate it. You still blew my mind, and I know defense a little bit better now. I probably need to get on it since I'm an offensive coordinator. And thanks, man. I need to get you back on after this season's over with to see how you shut down teams and you become the bane of everybody's season in Florida, man.
We try, man. I seriously appreciate the opportunity. Shout out to all the young guys and being able to do this, and then the older guys, well, not old, but guys that are established, have a following and things like that. Like Alex Kirby taking a risk on me and wanting to do the clinic with me and things like that. It means a ton. I constantly have young 20, 21-year-olds that are like constantly DMing me. Everyone, if you can remember back being that young coach on staff and not necessarily having a voice or being able to ask questions, guys like you are so important to be able to, let guys have a platform and reach out to them and make it fun. You know, a lot of times guys, young guys, that they are on a staff, it doesn't feel fun. You know, sometimes it leaves them out completely. So, you know, I love it. I appreciate being on here, man. Seriously. Thank you.
I appreciate it. And if you ever call me sir again, I'm going to come down there and punch you in the knee. So I appreciate it. Coaches, thank you all so much for tuning in. And until next time, let's continue to master the spread, score points, and have fun. I will see y'all later.